Good morning. Today is Sunday, December 3rd, 2023. Some of our greatest heroes in the Torah have a descriptive word associated with their name. Moshe Rabbeinu, which means Moshe, our teacher. Ima Rachel, our mother Rachel, Rachel. Aharon HaKohen, Aharon the Kohen, the priest. That makes sense because he was the first Kohen, but of course there are many Kohanim. Eliyahu HaNavi, Elijah the prophet. Of course there are many prophets. We don't usually refer to Yirmiyahu HaNavi. Usually we would say Yirmiyahu or Yeshayahu, but Eliyahu, we often say Eliyahu HaNavi. So these descriptive words, Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, of course, because Moshe taught us the Torah. Ima Rachel, or as one would say it in Yiddish, Mama Rachel, our mother Rachel. Of course, we have four matriarchs, but somehow Rachel is the motherly figure. There is no instruction anywhere to use these types of descriptive words with these individuals. And these names, Moshe Rabbeinu, to refer to Moshe as Rabbeinu, and Aaron HaKohen, Eliyahu HaNavi, these names are not even mentioned in the Torah. But they have just come to be from the collective wisdom of the Jewish people over time. There's one more of these appellations that emanates from our Torah portion, the Parsha Vayeshev this week. Yosef HaTzaddik, Yosef the Tzaddik, Yosef the righteous one. There are many people that were a Tzaddik. And looking at the sweep of Yosef's life, which we begin this week, and we're going to continue for the next couple of weeks, it's not immediately obvious why that description is appropriate. At the beginning of our Torah portion this week, Parsha Vayeshev, we meet Yosef as a rather arrogant teenager, a coddled teenager, a favorite son of his father, who seems to freely criticize and certainly upset his older brothers. Later, in next week's Torah portion, the Parsha Miketz, he becomes the ruler, second in command of Egypt. And then as the narrative unfolds, and there is a famine, and his brothers come down to get food, they don't recognize him, but he recognizes them, and he manipulates them. He allows them to think that he's very antagonistic towards them. He doesn't reveal himself right away until the moment that he will eventually reveal himself. It's not a flattering picture. And so this title that the Jewish people have bestowed on Yosef, Yosef HaTzaddik, Yosef the pious, the righteous, it's not immediately obvious how that term is appropriate for him. So I want to suggest that the title comes from the narrative at the end of this week's Torah portion. The brothers first consider killing Yosef. They're so upset with him, God forbid. And then they sell him into slavery. He is taken to Egypt. And as a slave, he works in the house of a man called Potiphar. And the Torah tells us at the end of our portion that Potiphar's wife is attracted to Yosef. Yosef was very handsome, the Torah tells us. And she was attracted to him. And the Torah tells us that he was tempted to have relations with her. He would have done this. He would have given in to this immoral act. And yet the Torah says, Vayima'en, and he held back. He refused. He did not do this. He withstood this temptation, even though, as a result of that, he was falsely accused by the wife of Potiphar, and of course she was believed, and he was put in prison. But he refused. He did not give in to that immoral act. And that is the definition of a tzaddik. A tzaddik is not someone who is so holy and so pure and so pious that they're never even tempted to do anything wrong. First of all, if that were true, then almost no one would qualify. But the fact is, everyone is tempted. Everyone, at some point, has a temptation to do something that is immoral, that is illegal, that is just plain wrong. A tzaddik is a person who is tempted, who does have the idea, the inclination that they want to do this act, and they withstand that temptation. That's righteousness. That's piety, to withstand a temptation that a person has. And of course, that puts being a tzaddik within our reach, because all of us are tempted at some point. And if we can do what Yosef did, vayima'en, to refuse, to stand back, to not give in to that temptation, that is the Torah's view of righteousness. That's what earns Yosef the title Yosef HaTzaddik, Yosef the righteous. So how do we do that? What tools do we have when we are tempted? Because, there's temptation. It's not such a big deal. I mean, I'll be honest with you. At this moment, I really do not have the temptation to go rob a bank. It's just not on my radar right now. But certainly there are temptations that are very, very strong. And so strong that may appear to us to be impossible to withstand. And of course, that appearance is valid because so often many of us do give in. So how do we withstand? Well, let's look at how Yosef withstood this temptation. And how can we borrow that to use in our own lives? Rashi says, when the Torah says, Vayima'en, and Yosef refused, he withstood the temptation, he did not give in to the temptation of the immoral relations with the wife of Potiphar, Rashi says, Ra'a demus diukno shel aviv. He saw at that moment in his mind's eye the image of his father. There's another source that gives a slightly different version, that he saw the image of his father Yaakov and his mother Rachel. He saw an image of his parents in his mind's eye. And he realized he could not do such an immoral thing. Sivan Rahav Meir points out something that is so important to every one of us. She writes, real parenting is not when we tell our children what to do or what not to do. It is not when we scold our children. It is not when we tell them, don't do this, or you should do this, you should do that. That's not the real aspect of parenting. The real depth of parenting is about our influence over our children over the years. Because this is true for every parent. In the end, we have to let go. We have to let our children live their own lives. We have to trust our children. We have to let them move on their own. And when they move on on their own, that is when the true depth of the parenting we did when they were younger, that's when it shows. In a moment of crisis and doubt, Yosef recalls his father and mother. He recalls their values. He recalls their home, the home in which he was raised. And his mother and his father serve for him as a moral compass. His mother had passed away many years ago. His father he hadn't seen in years. But notwithstanding the physical distance, in his mind's eye, they provide a moral compass for him. The test of parenting is not when the parents are around. The test of parenting is when parents become an image in their children's mind that their child or grandchild can recall at a moment of crisis or doubt. This is what I learned from my parent. This is what my parent stands for. That's the true test of parenting. And that image that stays with a child or a grandchild is not likely to be anything that we have said, but it is much more likely to be what we have done. Rabbi Shamshon Raphael Hirsch writes about this at great length. He writes, "Our child watches us when we walk and hears us when we talk, so the child learns to walk and talk. Not because of what we have said to the child, but because of what we are doing. The child imitates what we are doing. Aggressive parents will not be able to educate their children to be patient. Irritable parents will not be able to educate their children to be a pleasant character. Rude parents will not be able to educate their children to have good manners. And sneaky people will not be able to educate their children to have innocence and integrity. All the lectures given do not make an impression on a child as much as the living example of what that child or grandchild sees with their parents and their grandparents." We must instruct our children and our grandchildren. We must tell them what is right and what is wrong, and what are our expectations and what are our values. But even more important than that, we must model for our children and grandchildren what it means to be a moral person and to live with an awareness of God's constant presence, to resist inappropriate temptation, especially when it's strong, so that we continue to influence our children and our grandchildren when they are no longer in our immediate physical proximity. That is the very important way that we can become a tzaddik, and we can help our children and our grandchildren to become a tzaddik as well. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you all soon in person.